From County College of Morris, this is CCM All Access.
Hello, and welcome to CCM All Access, the show that brings you news and information from the County College of Morris. I'm Jack Riggin, and today we will be speaking with Professor Samantha Gigliotti, who teaches in the Biology and Chemistry Department here at CCM. Welcome.
Thank you.
How have you been?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. So could you tell us a little bit more for the students who may not be aware, for the viewers, a little bit more about what you do here?
Sure. I am a professor in the Biology and Chemistry department. I primarily teach ecology and biology of environmental concerns, but I also teach anatomy and physiology 1 and 2. And I am in my 10th year here at CCM.
That's awesome. And Um, what would you say has been rewarding for you so far in your teaching career, teaching with the students?
I would say probably the most rewarding thing would be when students come back after they've completed a course or after they've completed their degree, whether it's at CCM or a 4 year institution, or even I've had one student that has entered into graduate programs, and just having those students come back and really appreciate the things that you did for them or what they learned in your course and how they've been able to apply it to their degrees now. I think that's kind of the most rewarding thing is when students come back and keep that connection with you after they finish your class.
Yeah, and that connection is, that's what's crucial to all of our educations. And um, I would say would you say it's something that you excel at, connecting with your students, getting one-on-one time with them?
I think I try to the best I can. And because for me, I went to East Stroudsburg University as an undergraduate and as a graduate student. And those relationships that I formed with some professors in particular have been lifelong. I still talk to them, I still have those connections, whether it's something about research that is currently participating in, or to advice with different programs and students and teaching methodologies. So I think those connections are so important, and it's what everything's about in education is those connections that you can make. So I really think that I try to bring about those connections the best I can with my students.
That's great. And of course, with COVID-19 right now, of course, that ability to connect with your students obviously has somewhat been strained. Would you agree?
Yeah, I definitely would. It's become a little harder of an environment to really engage with our students, but it just gives us more opportunities as instructors to be more innovative and figure out more ways that, even though we might not always be in the classroom with the students and we're in this virtual, maybe remote or even hybrid where I see them sometimes, it's important to figure out new ways to kind of reach out to those students.
Yeah. So, how would you say you've been able to kind of work around, the restrictions that COVID has put on with your teaching?
I would say one thing that I think is really fun that I do, and I've done it before, even COVID-19, but I think it really lends itself nicely to this new environment, is I use social media, in particular Instagram. And so in my environmental course, what I have them do is follow me on Instagram. And then it's also part of their grade where they have to engage in conversations with myself as well as their peers by commenting on posts, and they'll post different things related to the environment. For example, they might post something of an environmental concern or a positive environmental initiative or showcasing nature's inherent beauty. And so it's just an additional way that I get to engage and interact with my students. And kind of today, most students are always on their phones, and I do that as well at times. And so I guess it's an easy thing to do throughout your day and just check on Instagram and get points for it in your class, but then also connect with your professor
Yeah.
and your peers.
And speaking of environmental, you've made a lot of environmental efforts through CCM through your work in the Legacy Project, and some I've heard you've also been on a few field trips. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I I would say one thing that really characterizes my teaching is trying to be as interdisciplinary as I can, right? Especially in my environmental course. Environmental science is all interdisciplinary. It's not just the sciences. It's going to be, yes, biology and ecology, but it's also going to be the ethics, and it's going to be the politics and economics and so many different areas. So, beyond my environmental science, I try to be interdisciplinary in nature. And some of the things that I do on campus and throughout the community that exhibits that interdisciplinary nature would be the Legacy Project or Parks Program. Parks Program, Project Yellowstone is currently the park that we're on right now. And Parks Program, I'm with a couple of other professors in different disciplines, Dr. Izaza from my discipline or from my department, Professor John Soltez from journalism, and then also Dr. Michelle Iden from history. And so I love being part of that project because we get to really work with our students outside of our class. And we get to do right now, we do Zoom sessions and different kinds of events with them where they can meet a park ranger, which is one of our upcoming events. We've had past events as well, where they got to meet with and do a Q&A with the author of Engineering Eden. And then previously, before we went into this COVID state, we were able to do a lot of field trips to the New York Conservation, Wolf Conservation Center, to the Great Swamp. And those field trips are great that we get to go on because we get to be kind of immersed in nature and do something more hands on rather than just always being tied to a classroom.
Yeah, I mean, that's what really I think is helps a lot of students is the hands-on learning, and of course with COVID that's been strained somewhat. So what would you say maybe the future would look like for future field trips you may pursue, or future projects that you may work with?
Well, one thing I could say is we're going to have a release of a virtual guided tour that I did of the Great Swamp, and it's going to be actually be released on November 19th. And that I think is where we're kind of going in some of this environment where students can't get to well, they can get to these sites, but not collectively as a group with their peers. And so we can kind of bring the Great Swamp back to them and have that opportunity for me to kind of just virtually go through some of the biology or the history or just different things about the Great Swamp that's right in their own backyard.
Yeah, of course. And I think that, a lot of times, me personally, I've been always so scared away from, I tend to be able to be scared away from sciences and all the equations that can go into it. But, the really hands-on learning, I think, really helps to get through to the students that require, some of that learning, or maybe even students who don't need that kind of learning as more of, extra knowledge just to add on to their science. And I think, uh, a lot of people also with science, they tend to go with the more safe routes and not try and challenge themselves sometimes. Would you say you agree?
Yeah, I definitely would. I don't try to scare my students on the first day of class when they enter in, but many students don't walk around saying, "Hey, I took that science class. It was super easy," right?
Mhm.
Science, it's not necessarily really hard. It's that there's a lot to it, and you might not be as familiar with it, and it's kind of a different language depending on what sciences you're taking. So I definitely recognize that, especially in my environmental class, which is designated for non-majors, because I want them to walk into my class and really leave that class with an understanding of the environment, but while they were in my class, feeling comfortable and trying to connect to anything that they feel familiar with. For example, I just mentioned the Great Swamp. And through that video, I was talking to Professor Doney, and he was able to send me some of his art pieces that he's done on the Great Swamp. And he has a whole collection of swamp images. And I said, wow, this would be great to add to some of my PowerPoint presentations because, it just makes students, if they're an artist, they might say, hey, wow, that's pretty cool. I could connect to this in a different way. And I think I try to do that as much as I can in my course with connecting to things that they feel comfort in. So then they're ready to learn more about the sciences because they have that level of comfort.
Hmm. And so, what I also wanted to ask you was, you received your bachelor's and your master's from East Stroudsburg University, right?
Correct.
And do you think some of what you were mentioning before, like connecting more with your students and did that go into like your decision making on, what you wanted to teach and, when you decided, what you're studying and what made you so passionate for teaching?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I oftentimes find myself sitting with students at advisement, and there's that question of we ask the student, "What do you want to do?" Right? What major are you? Is this what you see for the rest of your life? And that's a
Hmm.
really hard question. How do you know, for the traditional student that might be 18 or maybe even the non-traditional learner that's coming in later on, you don't often know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And I was that student. I went in actually as a math major as an undergrad just because I was really good at it. And I thought it was the safer thing for me to do. Science was a little harder, more challenging for me. So I said, let me go safer. Let me go with what I'm good at. And then I found this passion for sciences right away in my freshman year, luckily. But still, as I developed that passion and got to explore that more, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I continued on with my education. And it was through graduate school that I started to realize signs that I would like to teach, whether it was teaching some undergraduate students or peers that I worked with in the wildlife DNA lab on different techniques and things that we were doing in the field. And I started to see that I like teaching. I like sharing my knowledge, learning from my students or my peers. I think that's a big thing too. It's not just what I can teach you, but also what can you show me? What can I learn from you? And that adapts my or changes my teaching style. So for me, again, I didn't really know too much what I wanted to do. It's like I developed this passion and love for science. And then I started to see myself being a teacher. And it was one of my late professors. She passed away actually a few years ago from cancer, but she was my graduate advisor. And she was the one that really said, what are you going to do after you graduate? And I felt the pressure and I just got really scared and didn't really know because I felt like I had to know that we have to know this answer. And I didn't. And I said, I like doing this and this. And she said, yeah, you're really good at it. I think you should try it out. And she was the one that really supported me in some of my early teaching aspirations and was there even at my start at CCM of can I do this? Am I going to be good enough for my students? And she always had that support in me. And I think that's what's so important to keep those connections with your professors because they really do care and they want you to succeed.
I completely agree. I mean, very well said. Thank you. Now, we're going to go take a quick break, so stay tuned and we will be right back.
I'm Andrea Lucia, a graduate of County College of Morris. At CCM, I gained a high quality education, was involved with clubs on campus, and performed university research in tissue engineering. My CCM education prepared me for ongoing success. Today, I am at Cornell University, studying engineering and performing research in cardiac tissue engineering. The professors and staff at CCM helped me to start right and finish strong.
Welcome back to CCM All Access. I'm Jack Riggin, and we are here with Professor Samantha Gigliotti. So, going back to what we were talking about with your education with East Stroudsburg, how do you think that that education has translated into your teachings here at CCM?
I think in so many ways, and that's such a good question because when I think you're picking any institution to go to as a student, it's important that you pick an institution that gives you and provides you with a lot of opportunities. And I really think that I try to do that with a lot of my students by aiding in opportunities to participate, especially in the sciences, in research, and getting hands on skills. And those were the things that had the opportunities when I was an undergrad and graduate student at ESU, whether it was working at a wildlife DNA laboratory, which is now called the Dr. Jane Huffman Genetics Institute, and PA, Pennsylvania Tick Diagnostic Lab, and to working with New Jersey Division of Fish and Wildlife and getting to do research with black bears, such as research trapping and den work. And, all I think of those opportunities that I had and experiences, whether it's those bigger experiences to the small experiences of just being out in the field with one of my botany professors and them going over things on a red maple tree and being able to share that same or impart that same knowledge that I had many years ago with my students today.
Yeah, and I think those opportunities we see here at CCM, they, there's countless of them, especially in the science and chemistry, the biology and chemistry departments. Um, so why do you, I would say that sometimes, it could fly under the radar. And why do you think that, studying these and participating in these hands-on amazing opportunities is so crucial to a student's education here at CCM?
I feel that it's crucial to a student to get these opportunities for personal and then practical reasons, right? Personal, so that they can grow and develop and just become a more well rounded, educated student, right? But then on a practical sense, is they need these skills. They need skills to develop in their field and be able to make themselves more marketable and provide those experiences on their resumes or on their CVs. So I think for students, it's just really important to find those opportunities and make sure that when those opportunities are provided, that you use them and you don't miss out on some great experiences, whether it's participating in additional research in a class, like having an honors option. I teach an honors option ecology. And a lot of students sometimes will say, oh, more work. I don't want to do more work. But it's not necessarily more work. It's just getting more experience and making yourself um, have a greater amount of skills and experiences. So I guess that's kind of what I would say with that.
Yeah, that's how you have to really excel in the science area. Is it's all about experience and expanding the spectrum to which you study. And I think that um, that a lot of people also at CCM, they don't tend to take into account what impact that the efforts that the science department here at CCM has made, including, like you said, the legacy project, and other activities. What would you say maybe in the future you would provide, as you said, with the extra research and extra opportunities within your classes? Do you perceive any other future opportunities arising as well?
Yeah, I would say there's so much more than just the research, right? I think today it's so important to have great communication and great collaboration on anything, whether it's in your education or your professional lives. And so, one thing that I really do, which I mentioned before, was that interdisciplinary work, getting those experiences within the community, civic engagement, and um, finding yourself as more of a student, as more of a civically minded student. And so, participating in those events that are offered through Legacy, participating in those events through Parks program, or even participating in clubs, right? Getting together. There's an environmental club on campus, and they, despite all of that's going on with COVID, they meet every single week. This past week, they just, interesting, Great Swamp is a theme here because they just watched Saving the Great Swamp because the Great Swamp was going to become a jet port. And it was really activists and the landowners that really prevented that from happening. And so now we still have the Great Swamp. So they got to watch a film all together virtually on the Great Swamp. and they do different presentations on things that they're interested in, like the decrease or the decline in bat populations. And one of the recent projects those students did was they worked really hard to acquire bat boxes. And everything got held up a little bit. But once we get back on campus, we're going to have some bat boxes on campus to help and support the conservation of bats. So I think that all of those things, interdisciplinary community, working with each other, it's all part of that experience, not just in the classroom, but what you can get outside of the classroom too.
No, I agree, and that's what puts the community in college, and
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that comparatively to a lot of four-year schools, community college, because community colleges can excel further in that area than some four-year schools may, even though these larger programs may have more money available. You see that community colleges like CCM can really get closer with their community, and you can really connect with your students. Through your teaching. And um, with CCM, I think you've always said that you've always preferred the hands-on learning. And why would you say that is compared to a four-year school?
I feel like there were times for me at my 4-year institution that I kind of got lost. Like you feel lost. You're like almost in this herd of students in a huge lecture hall, and there's 100 peers around me, and you're like, should I ask this question? I don't want to ask it in front of 100 plus students, or you don't get as much of that one-on-one interaction with your professors. But luckily you can, have those opportunities more at CCM. Yeah, we still have, of course, lecture classes in bigger classrooms, but we also have those opportunities to reach out to our professors. We have smaller class ratio sizes, and I think those are all really important, especially for certain students. Not everybody's the same type of learner, so if you're a more reserved learner, it gives you just a more sense of kind of belonging, and that you can reach out to your professors.
I agree. And with with COVID-19 too, the with the Zoom meetings, you have now lecture halls that are in Zoom meetings of up to 100 kids compared to there, of course there's still lecture halls here, but comparatively you have mostly smaller Zoom meetings here.
Mhm.
And do you think that's, helped you continue your connection with your students and comparatively to a four-year school?
Yeah, I would agree. And just other opportunities like through tutoring, right?
Mm.
Being able to meet with my students on a regular basis every week. I participate in 3.5 hours of tutoring, and I'm always really busy. And I think that I'm always pushing my students to use those opportunities. And it could be a really long winded question and they need a full explanation on nutrient cycling, for example. Or they might just have one brief question and it's really quick, and then it's just talking about other things in the class. Today I actually just met with a student. We were talking about her lab report, and this is for ecology, and she was like, oh professor, can I show you my dogs? And then we just started talking about her dogs for 5 minutes, and we wouldn't get that opportunity actually in a regular setting. If we were on campus, I wouldn't know, a little bit about her three dogs.
Yeah, I mean, that's how what every student I think wants, as well as the teacher. It's a mutual connection that you want to share and you want to make with all of your professors throughout your educational career. And um, what would you say maybe is one thing that you've really gained the most from teaching here at CCM through through working with your students?
I would say the greatest thing that I have learned or appreciated from my students is honestly what they've taught me about myself, right? When they're so interested in a topic and they're like, hey, professor, did you know that there is a species that lives here and it does this? And they just have such an interest and spark and are inquisitive and they want to know more. That just reinvigorates me in a way as an instructor, because I remember being that way. I'm still that way. And I guess that's why I decided to teach, because I love learning. I want to do it every day. I'm constantly, I might not always get to read novels, but I always read journal articles and I read things in my field. And I guess that's kind of the best thing, I think, is what I learn about myself and I get from my students.
So from CCM, I think that, that's something that every student should hope to gain as they continue through their career, as well as the teacher. They both want something to gain from, and I can see that's why you've really fallen in love with teaching. And, what would you say you would say to other students who may be considering a career in teaching?
I would say that there's no perfect teacher, right? Not everyone is going to relate to every student, but the best thing that you can do is try and have a passion for it. If one thing I say about myself all the time in comparison to many of my other friends is that I love what I do every day. And there's so many people that go to work and can't really say that. They don't enjoy it. And even at the greatest times of my life when I was having my children, there were points where I'm like, I miss my students. I miss teaching. I miss being able to interact in that level. And I think the most important thing for you to be a teacher is to have that passion and drive. You might not be the best, academically, or you might not, you know, have like perfect grades, right? But that's okay as long as you care, you want to be better, you can do better, and you just have that dedication for what you're doing.
And that dedication is really what, that's what it's all about, and that's how you can be successful in this career. Well,
Mhm.
thank you, Professor, for coming with us. This has been another edition of CCM All Access. From all of us on the crew, we wish you good health, and thank you for watching.